Hola de nuevo al programa número 25 de Librísimo. Como siempre ya sabes que puedes suscribirte al canal tanto en YouTube como en iVoox y puedes dar a un me gusta o dejar tus reflexiones en la caja de comentarios. Esta vez nos acompaña la autora australiana Angela Slatter, que cuenta con un máster y un doctorado en Escritura Creativa. Ha ganado un World Fantasy Award, un British Fantasy Award y un Shirley Jackson y varios premios Ditmar, Aurealis y Australian Shadows, además de haber sido finalista en otros galardones. Tras varias colecciones de relatos y las novelas en mosaico del mundo de SOURDOUGH, que son SOURDOUGH and Other Stories, The Bitterwood Bible and Other Recountings y The TALLOW-WIFE and Other Tales, publicó las 3 novelas de la serie Verity Fassbinder, ambientadas en Brisbane, que son vídeo, CORPSELIGHT y RESTORATION. Después continuó con otras 3 novelas ambientadas en el mundo de SOURDOUGH, que son SOURDOUGH OTHER MURMURING BONES, The Path of the Thorns y The Rare Book of the Dead. En diciembre de 2023 se anunció que publicaría 7 libros con Titan Books en el Reino Unido, incluyendo 3 novelas cortas y una reedición de una colección de relatos. En 2024 su cuento Windows Walk ganó el premio Ignotus al mejor cuento extranjero. Hoy está aquí para hablarnos de El camino de espinas, su próxima novela en español publicada por Duermevela. And here we are. Today I am so excited. I had the pleasure of welcoming into Librisimo to the one and only Angela Slatter. Hello, Angela.
Hello, Christina. Thank you for having me on.
I am so excited, and I can't just stop repeating how excited I am, because I was telling you just before we started recording that I just wanted an excuse to invite you. And when I read that one of the upcoming books in Duermevela would be The Path of Thorns, I said, that's it. I have to call. I'm going to try to get Angela. And so thank you so much for being available for us, for the Spanish audience. And this is the first question I ask everyone that comes to Librisimo, because it's a nice introduction to the whole book. As you know, everybody, for all of you that are watching or listening to Librisimo, this is a space for new releases in Spanish, and The Path of Thorns is coming in Spanish. So I'm very curious to know, how did the title came about?
Well, funnily enough, I had this one originally was just called Morewood. I thought, oh, well, you know, a single word title, that's worked for me so far. And then the publisher said, yeah, we'd like something that's actually nicer, a bit more poetic. So I had to sit around and think and go, oh, yeah. And I finally came up with that. And then I thought, because I can incorporate that into the story as I was writing, because I was still writing it at that time. Which actually ends up as one of the sort of the stories that's told in the book, is about the Path of Thorns. So that is where that came from.
And do you remember roughly when and where were you when you got the idea of this particular novel?
I had been thinking for a while. I think I was in Sydney, and I was still working on doing edits on the first one, All the Murmuring Bones, and thinking about the next one, and I had vaguely in my head the idea of Jane Eyre meets kind of Frankenstein. So I was tapping away on that, and I was watching one of the latest Jane Eyre adaptations with Michael Fassbinder, in it, and watching that, and I thought, oh God, Jane is such a wet blanket. You know, he's a terrible man. He's not a good boyfriend. He's not a good husband. You know, I mean, so I'm not quite sure where we're given that as a romance to look for. So I started to think about who this character was, and I just had the name Asher Todd appear, which I love the name Asher. It's actually a, you know, sort of an ancestor's name, and I like the name Todd because in German it means dead. So these are the little things that amuse me. And I just thought, what if, you know, you all these big families, they entrust their children to strangers generally, and their nannies and governesses, and Gothic books normally have young women being sent to, you know, terrifying Gothic houses. But Asher goes there of her own free will, and she's got her own plan. And I just thought, yeah, what if this girl has another connection to the house and to the family that they don't know about? And what if she's there to bring the house down? So that's how my mind works, which is probably not a good thing to admit.
But it's true that you kind of like, I have to tell you the truth. When I was reading in the beginning, I thought about The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. That's the first thing before I thought about Jane Eyre. But my first, I think the whole governess setting in the beginning, because it's not clear. We know there's a secret there, but we don't know. And so first, you tend to think that a governess, a younger, as you mentioned, would be someone very vulnerable. But then when you realize that Asher Todd is nothing like that, it becomes, so you turn the, you know, the cliche, the Gothic cliche of the young, easily impressed woman, pure and with no experience, and you turn it completely. She has her own agenda. She has her secrets, but I wouldn't say she's vulnerable. She could be vulnerable in other fronts, but she's not someone that she's strong and she knows what she wants. She has a plan. She could be, you can argue that she could be or was manipulated by someone without giving spoilers. But she has strong will and she can defend herself because of something, because who she is. And I thought that was a great turn of the screw. You turn it. You turn the cliche. And so I thought, I was thinking, why would someone think that way? And then I thought, yes, well, if you just think about those stories and you wanted just to tell them in another way, empowering more this young girl. And I thought it was ingenious. That was a good thing. And you about the setting, you talk about at the end of the book, this is the place that lives inside my head, meaning your head, a mix of fairy tales and different time periods, mainly Victorian, Renaissance, and medieval. And then you talk about the sourdough world. For those who don't know what the sourdough world is, could you explain a little bit what is it about?
Yeah, it's when I was first sort of writing and developing my craft and working out the stories that I loved telling, that I really loved telling, I wrote a short story called Sourdough, and it was kind of a mix of the Goose Girl and, you know, the fairy tales where, you know, the princess is in hiding and she makes food for the prince, and she leaves a piece of jewelry in the food she makes for him. In this one, the Emmeline, who's the young woman, is a baker, and she starts being very creative with her baking, and it becomes something that these fancy breads are what the rich people of the town want. And she meets a young man at his, you know, the tasting party for his wedding. And they become lovers, and then everything goes downhill from there. But it was just that kind of a world that I could see really strongly in my head. And I thought, oh, this is the one, this is mine, this is my place, you know, and the town that's sort of built in quarters all around, you know, and Lodellen. So I had that story, and I thought maybe some of the other ones that I've previously done fit into that. And I had a version of Rapunzel, and I had a couple of other ones that I went, yes, that's what I was aiming for, but I didn't know what I was doing. And so those were the stories that I pulled together for the first collection, which was called Sourdough and Other Stories. And I think that's been translated into Spanish, Masa Madre. And that was just kind of where I started. So it is that fairy tale world for me. It's very close to our world, but you know that fairy tale creatures exist, and witches exist, and they are persecuted by the church. But everyone knows that magic exists, and it is done. So it's very much like our world, except magic is there. And my friend Kathleen Jennings, I've been really lucky in her because she's always happy to do some artwork for me. So, you know, so I'll sort of say to her, oh, if you could put a Renaissance top on the dress and then a Victorian era bustle on the skirt, that'd be great. And she rolls her eyes and she does it. So it is all those things that are mixed in there for me. So there's always an element of the fairy tale story in there, and the Gothic story, and the Gothic elements have become stronger the more novels I've written in this world. So yeah.
And also, I think it's a good marriage between the fairy tales or the folk tales and the Gothic, because in Gothic we always find something supernatural that no one can explain. Sometimes it's explained, sort of, but it's like, you know, this, as you mentioned, this world where magic exists, even though it's prosecuted or people try to avoid it, or not maybe avoid it, but it's not valued in a positive way, and people are scared. But we know it exists. It permeates. I don't know how to say this. It transpires everywhere, and you can see the signs everywhere. So they are creatures. Like in this book, there are creatures that are mythical creatures. They're sort of normal in that world, but they are not. They're mythical in our world. And so I wanted to know, how did you decide which mythical creatures are or magical creatures are you going to use in your stories?
One of the things that I did when I, came to write the novels in this was think about the folklore and the fairy tales that my characters would have been brought up with. And I thought, I've actually written all of this. I've written the base code of my universe in my own fairy tales. So I Sourdough and Other Stories, Bitterwood Bible, and the Tallow-WIFE. So I thought, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, what I would do is have my characters act as though the fairy tales they were told with among those stories. So sometimes they'll come through, and we were talking before, and you said how my version of Little Red Riding Hood is embedded in there. So, so that becomes a story that I've made up, becomes in a book that I've written, a story that my characters heard as children. So that's kind of how I wanted to do that. I mean, I loved the idea of, clearly, there are wolves in this one, but I wanted different versions of wolves, which is why there are all the different kinds of fairy tales that I've pulled elements from some Russian ones. I've pulled elements from some French ones. They're not straight retellings. I'll pull out an idea that I love that just really shines for me. And I think that's the. All the Murmuring Bones, it was mermaids. The Briar Book of the Dead, it was witches and ghosts. And the Crimson Road, I thought, okay, well, I'll write the vampire novel that I swore I'd never write. So it was about also reading so much vampire lore and working out what worked best for the story without sort of rolling into all those old cliches. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to rewrite Twilight. I didn't want to write the Vampire Diaries or anything like that. But I also didn't want to rewrite Dracula. Mm-hmm. So I think I did a good job. I hope.
Yes, it's actually very very dynamic. You can't stop reading. You go and it's like, oh, I want to know more and I want to know the secret, and it's so well paced that you just literally you find out everything that's happening towards the end, and everything makes sense, and you don't want to leave those characters. You want to continue knowing where they're going to do. But I wanted to ask you about monsters in general, because some of the stories that you write present some of them, or at least our society considers them as monsters. And I wanted to know, for you, what is it, the attractiveness in a monster? What does it allow you in terms of narrative?
Yeah. It very much depends on what I'm sort of using them for, where I'm deploying them. Are they actually a monster? Are they a fearsome kind of a haunt in the story, or are they a persecuted kind of a monster sort of thing? I mean, I think the worst monsters in the Path of Thorns are people. Yeah, and often your own family, which is very much what happens in this story. But that's sort of to in no way say that wolves aren't dangerous, but they're but that what they're going to do, rather than the people around you. You can't necessarily predict the people around you, but the wolf is dangerous. So they're for me, they're a way of examining fear and threat, but they're also a way of examining people and characteristics that are misunderstood and judged incorrectly, as the others are leaping to judgment from their own fear and that kind of thing. And I think sometimes also the monsters are a revelation and models for behaviour. So the novel that I have just handed in to Titan for the copy edit, it's called The Forest Darkly, and it's kind of grumpy menopausal witch in the woods, and children start disappearing, and of course if there's a witch in the woods, who are you going to blame? And one of the other characters says to her at one point, I can't believe you're so monstrous and so kind. And I think that's that element that I really love with it, is that what someone thinks is monstrous might actually also be very kind, because they're very blunt. So I think the monsters, you want them to be a bit scary, at least part of the story, until the rest of their story is known, which is this is why they're like that. But also sometimes monsters are just monsters. Yeah.
I also wanted to talk about you referred to it just now, to the horror within the family, because I think it's one of the elements of Gothic horror. Normally, not only there are haunted houses, which I think represents also the household, the family itself, haunting their members, but the relationships, the abusive relationships in a family, and not just between partners, men and women, or husband and wife, but also between the parents and the children, and how damaging are those for anybody. And as you mentioned, people who look often happens. People who look to society perfectly normal and acceptable, when they are in their home, they are hideous and they mistreat people around them. So I wanted to talk about this kind of like domestic horror that I think you portray very well in this particular story, because it's kind of like the key of the whole secret, not that we're going with Asher and into this quest for something. She has an agenda, and it has to do with the Morwoods, who has such a great name for a family, and the whole village there is kind of like it revolves around them in a way. So I wanted to know, what do you think about this, about the idea of the Gothic and the connection with the family, the abuses in the family, and the psychological toxic relationships?
Yeah, I think I'm fascinated by family relationships because we are so often sold the idea that your family is your safe place, your family will look after you. But every day the headlines tell us that this is not the case for everybody, you know, and even in relatively well-adjusted households, your family are the people who know how to press all your buttons, and they will just fun because they're a bit bored, you know. And so I'm really fascinated by that, and that's always, I think, a hallmark of the Gothic, is looking at a twisted familial relationship. And I think there's also that element of you know, particularly like the Victorian era, with unchecked male power, unchecked paternal and husband's power over women. You know, they got married, they owned property, all of those things. And as much of a monster as the grandmother figure is in this one, Leonora, you can see a lot of reasons why she became like that, how much power was stripped from her, and how her opportunities were taken away just because she was a girl. The monster she becomes is entirely her choice, but you can kind of understand it up to a point. And I'm really interested in that point where a person decides, I have been hurt, so I'm going to hurt everyone else around me. And then another person will go, well, actually, I've been hurt. I don't want to hurt anyone else in that same way. So I will change my behavior. I will take responsibility for myself and for what I put out into the world. And I think the Gothic is, because the Gothic often looks at, you know, distant relatives, someone no one's had anything to do with. And so you start often from the point of breakage already in family. You get a character who has lost everything, what they think is normal, and then they go somewhere else, to someone else who is family, and they're being sent there because it is family. It's meant to be a safe place. But it's often a family member who has exiled themselves or been exiled because they did not respect the bounds of, you know, the good boundaries of family. So you've just got this starting point of loss, then moving into drama and then danger. And that's really interesting to me. That's a great locus for looking at the dynamics of families. And you know, again, when I wrote the next novel, the Briar Book of the Dead, I really wanted to dig into that family relationship even more. You know, the whole idea of pressing buttons, you know, and just each other kind of thing. So that's fascinating. Might tell you a bit too much about my upbringing, but
we all have secrets in our families and issues, right? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and you know, and just some of the stories that I know, you know, I heard from my parents about my grandparents as well, and great grandparents, and some of the things that were done in the family, forced marriages and that kind of stuff is really fascinating to me, because I am here in 2025, and that's come through me. You know, I'm here because of a lot of that stuff. So I kind of like to look at it.
Yes. And we forgot to mention that you are joining us from all the way from Queensland, right?
Yes, Australia.
In Australia. Yeah. Thanks for being so close and so far in the same time. I had to tell you that when I was reading, there were parts with Leonora, especially, that I saw a little freckles of the evil mother, the evil stepmother of Snow White, a bit. This need to be young and beautiful and to go back to the glory of the past. So I thought also you probably included many ingredients from other stories. I picked up in few, but that was also something very interesting, because I think now with the substance, for example, the movie, it's been more exact, it's been more upfront, but up to now, this need to be young or look young, it's been just explored at a very superficial level, and I think there's more into it. And I think you did a great job into really tackling the whole story even deeper.
Thank you. I mean, I think that whole, we've got to stay young, we've got to stay hot, we've got to stay desirable forever, because it's become a real kind of a psychosis for a lot of women, because they think all of their power resides in how they look, and that they will manipulate they'll manipulate men through how they, and so they're constantly, you know, paralyzing one part of their face and putting something else in another part of their face, and oftentimes just making themselves into these weird looking voodoo dolls of themselves.
Voodoo dolls, I love it.
Voodoo dolls, it's terrifying, you know. But I also thought, you know, here is Leonora, who is this smart woman and had been so much and could have continued to be so much. But the thing that she ended up, when she thought she was going to get her second chance, the thing that she wanted was her beauty, rather than I can see again, and I have, you know, the power of being able to now you know, intimidate my awful son again and start to take back the reins of managing the estate and the village and everything like that. She was just like, no, that's not enough. I have to have my, you know, who's the fairest on the wall kind of thing, to the point she would sacrifice others. And I just thought, that tracks with so much of what we're seeing now. And you know, the reels that you're getting on Instagram are how, you know, you've got to have this piece of shapewear that will, you know, make you snatched, and, you know, if your hair isn't lying in this way, then, you know, as a human being, you're not important anymore. And all of this stuff, it starts to feed through for me in my writing like that.
I think it is there, and I think you've done it in a very subtle way and tackle, as I said before, many important issues that society is facing right now. So I wanted to ask you about what was the biggest challenge when you were writing this story?
I mean, there's always just the natural fear when you start writing, that you have bitten off more than you can chew, or you're not good enough to write it, or you you don't really know how it's going to end. But with this book, I actually knew how it was going to end. I wrote the last scene before I wrote the start of the book, because I had that vision of it, you know, of how I wanted that to end. And but I think you know, it was trying, in this particular case, trying not to make all the characters too villainous, because you know, there's a lot of bad behavior, and there's a lot of bad behavior from Asha as well, although it's, you know, it's very understandable. And I don't ever worry about writing likable characters. I don't think women have to be likable. I don't think characters have to be likable. I have to be interesting. She's really interesting. So I think just finding that balance between, you know, villainy and a kind of empathy for them as well, and working out what's the point that you have to kind of stop just before it becomes too much. So I think in the first draft notes there was a character that I killed off, and I felt bad about it. I felt, even writing it, I still wrote it because it was in the plan, and I was just like, get it finished, do it. It'll all feel okay. And I sent it off to my editor, and she came back sort of with a note on there just going, I don't think she should die. And I said, I'm so pleased you said that. So she got resurrected, and it changed the entire dynamic of that relationship between those two characters, and you'll know which one I'm talking about.
Yes.
And it's actually one of my favorite, you know, unwilling friendships that I have ever written. I think that's the big thing, is just, you know, can I get to the end of this? Do I have enough interesting stuff in this, you know, in this head of mine? The other thing is that because I'm frequently editing one book when I'm starting the next, when you've done your editing, the writing's beautiful. You've done so much work on it already. It's like, oh my God, I'm a genius. Then you start writing the next one, and it's like, I am scribbling with crayons. I have no idea what I'm doing. It's like finger painting at kindergarten. So there's just that thing of in your mind as a writer of going, oh, maybe I can't do this. Maybe I am an idiot.
You have to compartmentalize and think about, okay, this is this and this is that, and has nothing to do with,
Exactly. Head down.
Yes.
Head down, just keep going.
It happens then to you that sometimes you read something that you've written before and you say, oh my God, wow, I'm amazed of myself, right? It's a beautiful feeling. Even though sometimes of very, very early works, you come across some things that you say, oh, I wish but it's kind of like also part of who you are. You were that person, and at that moment it makes sense. So I don't think you have to be very hard on yourself of your really like earliest work. But I see what you say, and you kind of answer some of the questions I already had prepared, like about the Asher thought that her name. You already answered that, and you talk a little bit about the end. I was going to ask you about the end, and you mentioned that you already knew how it was going to end, which I love, because I am the type of person that I always write that almost 90% of the time, the end first, because I need to know where I'm going, even if things change afterwards, but at least I know towards where I am running. And then I have to decide from where I'm running, right? It's the starting point. And I'm glad that there's someone out there that also doesn't necessarily write linearly, which is fine. They've told us many times that you have to start from the beginning and end with the ending. And it's not true. There's many ways to write, right? What is your advice in that front?
Oh, look, and I because I, every so often I teach, and I always get, new writers saying, I'm doing it this way, I'm doing it the way I've been told, but it's just not working. And I say, because it's not working for you. And every writer is different. So, and I always say, look, have a constantly curious mind about techniques, and, talk to other writers about them at whatever stage of their career they are, because you might pick up a really interesting technique, and it might work for you, but it might not work for you. So I always say, give it 2 weeks. And if the habit has not embedded itself in your practice, then give it up, because writing's hard enough without creating a new obstacle. If I get stuck, I generally, if I get stuck on a chapter or a scene, but I know what scene after or the chapter after it is, I will jump forward and I will write that, because it kind of gives me, it's like throwing a rope across a chasm to yourself. Yeah. And then you can look back over your shoulder and go, okay, that's where I was. This is where I need to get to. Now I know what I need to do. And you sort of knit the bridge for yourself. Yeah. I have a friend who writes very, very detailed plans, which are often longer than her novels. And she writes from beginning to end. And every so often she'll say, I sense a disturbance in the force. Have you been writing backwards again? And the answer is probably yes. But I just think that is, start with what you know of the story, and see how you go from there. Because oftentimes, if you're waiting to work out what that next scene is, you'll be stuck there forever. Yeah. So you just, okay, but I know what the next scene is. Yeah. Right. I will go and write that. It's very clear in my head. And then you sort of go, I have written. So you get that little serotonin bump from that. Sense of achievement, and you can then sort of look over your shoulder and go, okay, I don't actually need what I thought I needed in there. I need this other thing. It needs to be an argument or something like that. So that's just, that works for me. And my first drafts are always what I call brain vomit. They're just on the page. They have square brackets with, sort of say, insert brilliant idea here, but I just keep writing. So I just have to finish that horrible first draft before I go back and start shaping it. So, yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be written.
That's a great advice. I think it is. So now to start wrapping up, I would like to know, what are you working on right now? You mentioned you edited a book while you were writing The Path of Thorns, and then another. I know that you have a commitment with Titan Books, so I'm sure you're very busy.
I am. I wrote. I finished the first ugly draft of A Path of Thorns at the start of December last year. That into my editor, and then I had a novella due, so I wrote the novella, and then I had the idea for the second novella, which both of those are contemporary folk horror, so they're quite different. And I worked out how to tell the second novella, so I went and I wrote that. So I'm a bit ahead of myself on those. And my next book that I need to start is called Our Lady of Battles. So it's in the sourdough world, but it's kind of set on another continent that I haven't ever written about before. So I think it's going to be kind of a lady knight and witches story. So I'm currently, writing on a lot of Post-it notes and drawing things on sketch pads and with arrows on it. So that is my next thing to work on. I have this is right, this will come out in August and I will be, it won't be embargoed anymore. I've just been awarded a fellowship at a university in Tasmania for 3 months.
Great.
So I will be down there writing Our Lady of Battles and also working on another one, which is called A Book for the End of the World, which I think might be a novella. So hopefully by the end of those 3 months, I will actually know what the book is about. So it's a lot of vague ideas and a lot of post-it notes at the moment. And when I finish that one, I have one more horror novella to do, which is called By Fire, by Water. And after that, I have one more novel, which is called The Scarred Queen. So, which I think will probably be quite connected to the Our Lady of Battles. But the A Forest Darkly, which is the one I've just put in, so the grumpy witch in the woods, at the end of that, she has to go and make amends for things she did in her youth. So that's kind of a link between those 3 books there. That is what I am working on at the moment.
Well, I really, really hope that you will come soon with, to speak about the translation into Spanish of any of your works. I mean, we hope that we will have you over again. We cannot get enough from you.
I would love to go back to Spain. I had such a wonderful time at Celsius 232 last year. So maybe next year I would absolutely love to do that.
And you were awarded a Ignotus Award for best. Yes. So it's fantastic.
I still haven't seen the award, but
you want me to show you how they look like?
Yes, I would love that. Thank you.
This is how they look like a monolith.
Oh, pretty. Yeah, I like it.
And,
nice.
They are, at least this one, was made out of an actual grave stone.
Oh, that's the most cool thing in the world.
So this one is really heavy. There are some other that are in another material that is lighter, but this one is really, really...
That is amazing.
This is really cool. So they will get you this.
Fantastic.
And
yes,
I would love to know if you could recommend someone alive to be in Librissimo for us to interview. Who would it be?
Yes, Alex Harrow.
Okay.
Who wrote Once and Future Witches. She would be my pick.
Of course. Maybe we will have her over and we will tell her that it was you who recommended her.
Yes, blame me. That'll work. So
we will. And my final question, even though I could stay here forever talking to you, it's, do you know or you remember or you can tell us the last book that you've read that it was so wonderful that you said, I had to recommend it to everyone?
I have read 2 and they're both quite strange. I read Lucy Rose's Lamb, which is a weird horror, very confronting, but just so incredibly written, and the voice of the protagonist is amazing. So that would be number 1. And the other one is called Meet Me at the Surface, and it is by Jodie Matthews.
Okay.
And it's a lot of Cornish, very dark Cornish folklore about changeling children. And again, just an amazing read, that, and not everything I read resonates or makes me feel like my brain has changed, kind of thing. But those are 2 that I felt like, actually, yes, I can feel my gears working again. I just really loved both of those.
Well, yes. Thank you so much. We are building this small library here in Librissimo. We will have the list out when this first season ends. And I wanted to thank you so much for making the time to be with us. And I can't wait for everybody to read The Path of Thorns. It's an amazing book. You're going to have a blast. It's super entertaining, and it talks about very many interesting and meaningful issues, but it's also really fun. So you need to give it a try, please. And thank you again, and I hope to see you. This is your house, and come anytime. I hope very soon to talk about another of your books in Spanish.
That would be fantastic. Thank you so much, Christina.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.